All righty. Welcome back, everybody. We are continuing our series with Jamie on the level 3, 4, and 5 requirements and routine evaluations. Really appreciated the feedback we've gotten. I just figured I'd open today with a little bit of a recap of the schedule of these webinars because we have several really busy weeks. People ask every single week, and I just want to remind everybody, every single webinar is going to be posted. As I said in the all program meeting, please allow up to 1 week for it to be posted because everybody in USA Gymnastics is dealing with a series of world championships all in a row. We're a small department. They are usually coming up faster than that. And as you can see, the level 3 is posted. The code updates of the development program is posted. Level 4 requirements and routine evaluation from last week is posted for those who might have missed it. This week, we have level 5 requirements today, level 5 evaluation tomorrow, and FIG body difficulty Friday. And as you can see, it's a robust November and December. So without further ado, Jamie, go ahead, take it away. And when you're finished, feel free to sign off. Excited to see it and excited to see so many people on learning about level 5 today.
All right, thank you. Yes, we'll continue today with our series of level 3 through 5, and we will go over the level 5 requirements. And this one is longer than level 4. There's more apparatus, more requirements. So I will open the webinar and we'll jump right in. Sharing my screen. Okay, I think everyone should be able to see that now. I got another weird notification about installing an audio drive, but it's given me that before and it's worked. So I'm just going to assume that it's going to work. If you can't hear the audio, I don't think it really matters today anyways. So that's fine. All right. So we are going to do level 5 requirements. We'll start with going over level 5 floor difficulty. So in the level 5 floor routines, we have taken a big jump up in the number of difficulties. Well, really a little jump up, but it's bigger than the number we've been looking at in the other routines. Here we have 7 body difficulties. They can be 0-1, 0-2, 0-3, or 0-4 in value. And like we talked about with level 4, that 2.5 maximum is actually lower than what you would have if a gymnast did body difficulties that were all 0.4 in value. So sometimes we get the question, is that wrong? Or what do you do if they execute body difficulties that are all 0.4 in value? If that were to happen, you would give that 2.5 maximum. It's okay for them to do the body difficulties that are all 0.4, but they can still just be awarded that maximum 2.5 value. So in the level 5 floor routines, we have a minimum of 1 body difficulty from each body difficulty group executed on the opposite side. So that means on their opposite leg, they need to do 1 jump or leap, they need to do 1 balance, and they need to do 1 rotation. And each routine must include 2 difficulties from each body group that we just talked about, plus 1 additional difficulty. So that's how you're going to know that they're on 2 different legs. If you have at least 2 from each body group, you need to have at least 1 on each side. Next, we have the composition requirements, and this has a 1.5 maximum. As we've talked about before, the value is given for each required element performed according to its definition. And a reminder that the required pre-acrobatic element is penalized if it's missing, but it doesn't have value. And this is what I mean by that last statement I just said. We see here in level 5 floor that these pre-acrobatic elements are required, but they have no value. However, they will be penalized if the gymnast does fewer than or more than the allowed number, which we see down here under penalties. So now we'll take a look at the other requirements. In level 5 floor routines, they're required to show 3 dance steps combinations. They're required 1 full body wave forward, 1 full body wave backward, and another different full body wave. And that can be free of choice, whatever additional body wave that gymnast is good at or the coach wants to put in and train. We did talk about the forward and backward body waves previously in level 3, but I want to go through it one more time as a refresher here. So here we're going to watch a video of Evita performing a forward body wave. I'm going to play it again and talk through it. So the wave is performed by standing with the arms upward, the feet are together, or they can be in another standing position. We see that she does have hers together. It starts from extending the hands and the arms, opening the chest. I'm going to try to drag this along. We see this extension and opening of the chest, and then she rounds her trunk forward. You can see very clearly in slow motion. Right here, we have the round semi-squat position. So in the description, this is what that round semi-squat means. And after this, we're going to see the body parts moving forward in the following sequence. Let's watch and see her knees come forward, then the thighs, pelvis, stomach, chest, shoulders, and the head. The arms should follow the movement of the wave in a sequential manner. And ideally, the gymnast ends, as we see Evita right here, with the neutral spine. Thank you, Evita, for this beautiful body wave.
Thank you, Jamie Riggleman, Vincent Riggleman. This is so happy that you're reviewing this again for every single level coaches, because I still see our coaches in America posting on Instagram the waves that they do, and that it is not with the sequential contraction. It's 2 semi-aggressive movements down and arch without the contraction of the knees, or vice versa, or a side position, a plie, and a side position without the contracting that you've just walked through. I really want to thank you, whether you're 3, 4, 5, or Evita, who's ranked in 10 best in the world. This is an important component all the way up through gymnastics. And thank you so much for taking the time to review it one more time. Thank you to coaches for your time to focus on this. It is a sequential element, not a harsh movement forward and a harsh movement back, or vice versa. Thank you for doing it, Jamie. We didn't even talk about it, and I've thought about it so many times since level 3, and I again allowed myself to interrupt you, or to support, not interrupt. I want to support what you're reviewing here, because it's important for absolutely everybody, and your explanation is excellent.
Yes, thank you. And Caroline, you hinted at this, well, you said it well. I'm going to reiterate it again. There is nothing extreme about this wave. It's soft. It's sequential, like we talked about. She is not showing off flexibility. And something that I also see coaches doing, and I think they're just trying to figure out how to get credit if they don't understand maybe, is put a ton of extra waves like this at the front and the end. And it's not necessary. We see this very simple, nice wave from Evita. This is all you need.
I'm so happy you said that too, because I'm also confused about all those extra movements when I see them.
Mhm.
And as far as I understand, they have no bearing on the score. So this is the way to perform a valid wave.
Yes.
Thank
All right,
you.
we'll watch this beautiful wave one more time as we move
Thank
on.
And we understand that waves can't be slow motion. It's just the principle of the wave.
Of course, we can see the same movement. I was playing it slow motion just to talk through it, but now if we play it at full motion, she's not going super fast. She's going gently and sequentially, and we can see the same thing. So now we'll move on and see the back body wave. Similarly, this wave is performed by standing with the arms upward to feet together, or they can be in another standing position. It's going to start with a back bend. We'll watch her do it. Maybe if it's going to play. There we go. Starts with a back bend. Then the knees start to bend. The chest starts to contract and the hips push back. This is the important part that Caroline was talking about. We often miss. We often see the arch and then the gymnast whips themselves forward. This important part is what we're about to see here, where the knees start to bend while the gymnast is in this arch position. Then we see the chest start to contract. The important part is as the hips push back. You can see it here. Then this will be followed by a rounding up of the spine and a contraction of the neck and the head. Traditionally, the arms execute a large circle backwards, then come down toward the hips, continuing to move forward until all parts of the body arrive in that rounded semi-squat. I'll show again what that means. Watch the arms, this large backward arm circle, the rounded semi-squat. But this is not the only way the arms can move. As long as they are included, the arm variations that follow the movement of the wave and possibly match the character of the music are accepted and even encouraged. That can be challenging with the young ones. I would encourage coaches teach this basic wave first, but the arm variations are allowed. And then this wave finishes by rolling all segments up sequentially, again, ending with that neutral spine. Here it is. And thank you, Lily, for this wave. All right, now we're into some new content on body waves. This is not truly new. If you've seen the body waves course, these are included, but we're going to discuss the different full body wave. That's also a requirement for that third body wave in level 5 floor routines. So as we just discussed, a full body wave is any sequential contraction and decontraction of all, that's an important word, the muscles of the body along the chain of segments like an electric current. Thank you, Caroline, for this explanation. I'm sure it was yours. From the head through the pelvis to the feet or vice versa. Again, the participation of the arms is free and determined by the choreography. So we're going to see some examples here of possible different full body waves. This is not all of the possibilities. Really, anything that's a sequential contraction and decontraction of all the muscles in the body along that chain can be valid. But here are just some examples for inspiration. This would be an example of a side wave that also isn't just harsh side to side. She's really waving and moving through it, a correct side body wave. We'll watch again. We can see that the torso, the head, it's all included. This would be an example of the back body wave that we just saw, but with this different position of the legs. So if a gymnast were to perform this, it can be valid also as the back body wave because it's not required for the feet to be together, but this is a variation on it. And here's what people often call a worm. Now, I do want to note that it's important if you put the worm in the routine, or if you're judging a routine that has this worm body wave, that you watch and see, is it really sequential? Are all of the body segments truly participating? We see gymnasts with this in the routine, but it's not performed like a wave. Sometimes they just kind of flop on the floor or even flop like this up to their knees. But I'm going to play this one more time and watch how truly all of the segments are included here. So if you're going to do this worm body wave, make sure that you really focus on doing it correctly with each of the segments as we see in this video. I'm just checking to make sure we didn't have any questions about these body waves.
Jamie, it doesn't look like it's about body waves. It looks like it's about the recordings, which at the very end I could show, or you could also show people where to find them at the end. Either one is an option.
Yes.
Maybe I can loop back to when Jamie mentioned all those extra arm movements, because we see them kind of a lot. Certainly, I think, and Jamie will tell us for sure, I mean, it's up to the gymnast and the coach. You can do those. You can do those if it matches the music. You can do those if you want to do that for the style of your routine. I think what Jamie was saying, and I would love to put an exclamation point on it, is that is not how the wave becomes valid.
Right.
And we saw it so many times that it looked like maybe people thought that's how you're going to get the wave as a valid wave. It has to follow the definition of a wave, and therefore those arm movements, and Jamie was pointing out, there's a lot of freedom in choreography, so you can do that. You can definitely do that. Correct, Jamie? It's
Yes.
just not that those extra arms at the end don't give you the validity of the wave. It is following the definition as she's shown so nicely. So thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. And that's exactly what we mean by the arms are free, but it's not part of what makes it valid. So yes, thank you, Caroline. And what we see sometimes is a club, not a club, multiple clubs, who will put those extra waves on the end, regardless of what the music is. It might be these sharp, strong accents, and we're doing those same extra waves at the end of the front body wave. And so that's why I wanted to address it and make sure people understand that's not required. That's not how you get credit. We've seen the base. And yes, of course, if that does match your music, go for it. If it doesn't, I would encourage you not to put them there.
And not to put them there if it doesn't match the music, because that's how you think it's going to be valid.
Right.
It's going to be valid if you have a sequential contraction along the chain.
Right. And these young gymnasts often maybe exaggerate that even more than the coach would intend, because they want to get credit so bad, and they don't understand that what's more important is that base part of the wave. So of course it can be working with the gymnast to understand this important base part of the wave along with the coach's understanding.
Now, Jamie, you do have two questions here related to waves.
Okay.
And one is, do the gymnasts need to finish in releve for the front or the back wave?
Okay, thank you. Yes, I see these. So Maya, no, the releve is not required. As long as there is that sequential movement, it's not necessarily necessary to show releve at any point. They would need to use the lower legs and the plie, of course, with the ankles, but you don't need the releve. And then I see this other question is, can I use a back body wave on the knees? The answer to that would be no, because then there's no way for you to use that plie. If the gymnast is on her knees, you can't incorporate that lower part of the foot and the ankle and the leg into the body wave. So it would not be valid to have a full body wave on the knees. All right. Any other questions about body waves? This is great before we move on. All right. If you, we get to see our worm one more time. If you have any other body wave questions.
Looks like you just had a comment from a judge who said the coaches need to make sure that the kids do not prematurely straighten their knees, which is, I think, exactly right. And what Jamie was trying to show with that sequential movement, instead of just a plie and straight legs, a forward bend and a backward bend, it's the chain. So you're exactly right.
Yes, I'm trying to go back, because where we see that most often is on the front body wave, what Gulia is talking about. And the gymnast will go here. And then instead of this sequential movement right there, they just stand straight up and go right into the arch. And that's what Gulia is getting at by that comment. Yes. And I see another question. Side wave has to be hollow position or just side to side. Okay, so the side wave does need to include the torso and the head and the neck. So we need to see that contraction, that important word, the contraction and the decontraction of the torso with the participation of the head and the neck. If we just go side to side, this is not a wave. So yes, it needs to have that hollow or contracted position.
And when we cover body difficulty in the FIG, I'm going to tack on probably some extra body waves in that presentation in 2 days. We can go a little bit more into side wave. I don't know how much more Jamie has here about side wave. So a side wave, right? The contraction, it can also be it's the upper body here, right? This melting down and back, and not, as Jamie said, a side bend, a plie, and then aggressive side bend.
Yes. And I see Masha just said it would be helpful to show what is not a wave. Yes, I will grab some examples. Masha, I have several, and throw them in for when we practice tomorrow. And I can show some invalid waves or these common mistakes that we're talking about. I have plenty of those videos and happy to throw them in for our practice tomorrow.
And I will say this, we do have an entire body waves course online for interested coaches or judges. It's been out there for, Jamie and I did it together. Jamie,
A long time ago. What,
yeah, so it's been out there for quite a while.
4 years.
And it goes through validity and non-validity. So I want to highly recommend it. Maybe at the very end of this, Jamie, we can also, or tomorrow, whatever, we'll make sure you guys know where that is. And on our resources page, we also have an entire link you can click to for body waves and training of body waves and all that. So
Yes,
this has been a helpful kind of discussion. Great examples, Jamie. Thank you for the judges who chimed in and the coaches. This is really something where we can improve, I think.
definitely. And like Caroline said, actually, none of this is new. We talked about it in depth, Caroline, and I added extra comments, but this content is, like Caroline said, from that full body waves course. So I will jump forward now, back to where we were, to level 5 apparatus difficulty. So here we're back to having 5 body difficulties and a 2.0 maximum total body difficulty score. Again, they can be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, or 0.4 in value. In these apparatus routines, each body difficulty group must be represented. And then you'll have an additional 2 difficulties each from different body groups. What that means is you cannot have 3 balances in the routine. You can have 2 balances maximum. Those additional 2 difficulties have to each be from different body groups. Hopefully that is clear to everyone. Then for the composition requirements, we have a 3.0 maximum. This value is awarded for each element performed according to its definition. And another note is that starting in level 5, the minimum required apparatus elements are allowed during the dance steps combination. We had talked in level 4 about how they are not allowed during the dance steps combination. There, they need to really just focus on one thing at a time. But here in level 5, that is okay. So judges, as you are evaluating the dance steps, make sure to keep an eye out for any apparatus elements that are in those dance steps also. We'll go over some notes again about the validity of required apparatus composition elements. They must be performed by their definition to be valid. Examples of what would be valid for the composition requirements would be correct execution of the apparatus element according to its definition, or an attempt to perform the apparatus element according to its definition, but doing so with an execution fault and/or a drop. For one of these elements to be invalid, it would be either not attempted at all or not performed according to the definition. And some examples of things that would be invalid due to not being performed according to the definition would be if there's a ball that does not fully roll over 2 large body segments, or if there's a catch in one hand that uses support on the body, or a small throw of 2 clubs that does not have that full 360 rotation. Here we'll go into detail about level 5 ball requirements. The gymnast must show 2 different rolls of the ball over a minimum 2 large body segments. They need to have 1 series of a minimum 3 small bounces below the knee level from the floor. Below the knee level is important. I think sometimes the gymnasts don't understand that it needs to be below the knee level. And even if the coach choreographed that, often the gymnast will let the ball come up higher. So make sure your gymnasts understand, okay, this is your series of small bounces, and make sure they understand that small bounces mean below the knee. So they keep those small. Then there's also a requirement for 1 high bounce, which is knee level or higher. The gymnast must have a figure 8 of the ball with large circular movements of the arms. They must have a catch of the ball with 1 hand from a high or medium throw. And a reminder, like we just talked about, this catch must be without the additional support of the body. That includes the second hand. If the second hand comes, it's invalid, or if it comes against the body. And it's also not possible from a small throw or a thrust. Then they're required 3 different throws once they get to level 5. And it's important to remember that these each must have a different technique, and they must be a minimum 1 height of the gymnast. It's relatively common in level 5 that the gymnast will not get credit for all of their throws. And that could be because they're not that minimum 1 height of the gymnast, or it's really sad when this happens. Maybe they did have 3 throws, but they repeated the same throw technique. That happens most commonly in ball. I promise you there are plenty of options for different throw techniques, even in ball. We'll look at some later. So please make sure that you have choreographed 3 different throw techniques in your level 5 routines. And then they must have a catch with a minimum 1 criteria from 1 of those throws and 2 dance steps combinations. I'm just double checking to make sure we didn't have questions on this. Okay, I think we're good. Now we'll go through examples. Here are the large rolls of the ball over a minimum 2 body segments. A minimum of 2 large segments of the body must be passed over during the roll. During the free roll, after receiving an impulse, the ball moves freely by itself without the assistance from the gymnast's hands or other body parts during the main phase. The rolls over the body should be smooth without bouncing. Examples of large segments of the body are the full length of the trunk, the length of the back, the full arm, or the full leg. Also, examples of something that would be across the back of the neck. That would be a small body segment, right? Here we see a roll across 2 arms. We commonly see that in these level 5 routines. And a roll down the back. This one is slightly questionable. Her arms are so short, so she really does reach down with almost straight arms to grab the ball. I would validate that one, but something that we see commonly is the gymnast might have their arms very bent and catch the ball on their upper back if they're attempting this, and then it would not be valid. So we need to watch on this one to make sure they really reach down by their pelvis to get the ball. Now we will talk about the series of 3 small bounces. And like we talked about, these need to be below knee level from the floor. Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze, so I muted myself. Maybe not. I apologize in advance if I do. All right, bounces with the ball may be executed perpendicular, which means straight down, or at an angle to the floor, they can use one or both hands. During the bounce, the gymnast should make one or both of her hands accompany the ball downward through the push. This is really like a small, gentle hand wave. We don't want to be playing basketball and smacking the ball. It's soft. During the bounces, the gymnast must avoid clapping her palm noisily against the ball. Then she must lift her hand or hands up together with the ball in preparation for the next push. We're going to see some examples here. These will be a series of small bounces. A series of small bounces. We saw there she had higher bounces at the beginning, but then she went into the smaller bounces. Now here's an example of a series of bounces that are not below the knee height. This example would be invalid toward the level 5 requirement. And unfortunately, it is somewhat common to see this and have to invalidate such a relatively easy difficulty for the bounces being too high. So we can see she changed a little bit what she was doing, just like this previous example, but the bounces were still very high, as opposed to, I'll play this one again, she does something similar, but then she clearly changes to those small bounces. And we'll watch this one again. Hopefully that's a clear difference there. I see we had a question come in about the tosses. I will get to that when we get back to the toss and catch part, Natasha. Okay, next we have one high bounce, knee level and higher from the floor. Remember that the height of the bounce depends on the timing and force of the impact. So that's a note to think about both when you're trying to do the small bounces and for the large bounce. An active bounce consists of an active release. This means the gymnast pushes the ball to the floor and then retrieves it. Apparatus elements where the ball falls passively to the floor do not belong to any apparatus technical group. And we had some good examples of this in the presentation that Elena Savinkova did on group just a short ways back. She went into this and showed examples of what would be invalid. We're going to look here at 2 valid examples of bounces, knee level and higher from the floor. Nice simple bounce. That's all it needs to take to get credit. But of course, with variety, something like that would also be valid. Next, we have figure 8 of the ball with large circular movement of the arms. During a figure 8 of the ball with a circular movement of the arms, 2 consecutive, meaning one after another, circles must be completed. Ample movement of the trunk is encouraged, but not required. At one point it was required. So judges, just remember that's no longer a requirement, but coaches, it is encouraged to show that ample movement, which will often lead into better expression, better musicality if they're using their whole body in that figure 8 movement. Here are examples of 2 different figure 8s. All right, now we'll talk about the catch of the ball with one hand from a high or medium throw. The catch of the ball in one hand must be from a large or medium throw. It cannot be from a small throw or a thrust. I've said that a few times, so hopefully everyone is clear on that. And no contact with the forearm, this part right here, or the body is allowed during this catch. If the gymnast attempts the catch in one hand correctly, meaning it isn't grabbed with 2 hands, it isn't against the body, etc., and then drops her ball, it's still a valid attempt. If the gymnast catches with the help of the second hand or against her body, then it's not by the definition and it would not be counted. Here's an example of a properly executed catch in one hand. All right, and I'll answer Natasha's question now. So the gymnasts need to have 3 different throw techniques in their routine. And then we know that one of those needs to have a catch with criteria. It is possible for one of the other two to have this catch in one hand as the catch. That would be valid. They don't need to have a fourth throw in their routine so that they can then catch that fourth throw with one hand. Now they could. And if they do a fourth throw for the purpose of this catch in one hand, they can repeat one of the previously done throw techniques. Hopefully that makes sense. So there's a minimum of 3 throws. You could choose one of those to have your catch with criteria and another one of those to be your catch in one hand. That's valid. That's all you need. Those all 3 need to have the different throw technique. If you choose for this requirement to do a fourth throw and then catch in one hand, it's okay for this fourth one to repeat one of those 3 techniques of the throw. Hopefully that's clear. Let me know if not. All right. Here are some examples of various ball throw techniques. Since we so often see the gymnast repeating just a plain throw from one hand, I wanted to give this collection here of different possibilities. They're not all the possibilities, but some different throw techniques that you can use. Of course, she also has the catch there with criteria. Right now, we're just looking at the different throw techniques. All right, plenty to work on and choose from. Next, we'll move on to level 5 clubs difficulty. In the clubs routines, they're required 2 different series, minimum 3, of small circles with both clubs. They can be simultaneous or alternating, but the gymnast must have 1 club in each hand held by the small end. Then they're required to have 1 set of mills. 1 mill consists of a minimum 4 to 6, depending if you're doing single or double mills, as a lot of people call them. So minimum 4 to 6 small circles of the clubs with a time delay and alternating crossed and uncrossed wrist each time. Again, the clubs are held by the end, the small head. Then the gymnasts are required to have 2 different asymmetric movements of the 2 clubs. And to be valid, an asymmetric movement must have the 2 clubs different in their shape or amplitude and in their work planes or direction. We will dig into this deeper with examples coming up. They're required to have a small throw and catch with rotation, minimum 360 degrees all the way around, rotation of the 2 clubs together unlocked. This can be simultaneous or alternating. We'll also talk more about what alternating means coming up. Just like the ball, they're required to have 3 different throws, each with a different technique, minimum 1 height of the gymnast. Then they must have the catch with minimum 1 criteria from one of the throws. They can have more than 1 criteria. Doesn't make it worth any more, but it's possible. Just a minimum 1 criteria from one of those throws. And then again, we have 2 dance steps combinations. Here are some just basic facts about clubs and handling clubs. Handling 2 clubs simultaneously requires an exceptional degree of coordination and very quick reaction. So this can be a challenging apparatus for these young level 5s. And just remember, it requires quite a lot of hand-eye coordination. The clubs have 3 parts. They have the body, which is the bulb part on the end. They have the neck, which is the slim part, and then the head, which we've talked previously about holding the head, that small spherical part. The clubs must be gripped loosely so that they're free to move. If the hand is facing palm down, the head of the club should be gripped between the thumb and the bent middle finger. If the hand is palm up, the club should be held with its head between the thumb and the palm. We'll talk about series of small circles now. Again, the series is a minimum 3, and small circles are executed with circular movements of the wrist. These circular movements are important in the execution of the small circles as they determine the speed of rotation of the apparatus. And it's also important, as we just talked about, to hold them loosely. We don't want them gripped like this. We want the wrist to be moving, but the club should be loose inside that palm. Rotations of the clubs take place in well-defined planes and maybe in a variety of directions. We will see a lot of different planes and directions in these videos here, but the rotations can be up high, they can be low, they can be inside of the wrist, they can be outside, above the arms, below the arms. The rotations of the two clubs may be simultaneous, meaning at exactly the same time, or successive, meaning one starts and the second one follows. And they can be performed in vertical, horizontal, or frontal planes. So many possibilities with these small circles. We'll look at some examples here. We see this gymnast doing the simultaneous circles of both clubs. We see that they are in front of her arm. This gymnast is doing small circles backward, and they're on the outside of her arm. This gymnast is an example of where they're successive. We can see they aren't rotating at exactly the same time. The clubs are following each other in the circles. It's different. And actually, they're actually rotating different directions. It's hard to see with it that small. Here we see the series of rotations of the clubs over the arm. This gymnast is alternating rotations in front and behind her body. It's not the best technique, but an interesting example of just a variation. And this gymnast is rotating the clubs forward on the outside of her arm. So all sorts of possibilities. Now we'll talk about mills. A mill is composed of a minimum 4 small circles of the clubs with time delay and alternating crossed and uncrossed wrists each time. The wrists should be as close together as possible. Now, if a difficulty judge sees mills and the wrists are far apart, they still give credit, but execution is going to take that penalty. Coaches, so as you're teaching it, work to get the wrists close together. And something that I used to find helpful when I was coaching with a young gymnast, if they don't understand or are having trouble, you can take a hair tie, one that's stretched out enough that it's not going to hurt them, but a soft hair tie or scrunchie, put it around both wrists and have them try, and that will usually get the point across that their wrists should stay together. It shouldn't hurt them, but just kind of a gentle reminder to keep the wrists together. Wrist flexibility then is necessary for good mills. The clubs should hang loose so that part of the movement originates from the club's own momentum, and the wrist and fingers only help originate and finish the rotation. The mills can be on the vertical or horizontal plane. So for vertical mills, the circle impulse can be either down or up. And for horizontal mills, that circle impulse can be either left or right. The mills can be either 2 set or 3 set. In level 5, we almost always see the 2 set or double mills. And that is going to be 4 alternating small circles of the clubs, 2 on each side, with the wrists crossed and then uncrossed. It's also possible to do 3 circle or triple mills. Then you'd have the 6 alternating small circles of the clubs with 3 on each side, crossing and uncrossing the hands each time. Oh, here are our examples. All right, so we see here this gymnast is doing the vertical mills, and then that impulse is going down. This gymnast would be doing the horizontal mills. this gymnast would be doing vertical mills and the impulse would be up. And this is an example that the mills can also be done over the head or in another plane. Now we'll talk about asymmetric movements. Asymmetric movements must be performed with different movements of each club that are unique in their shape or amplitude and work plane or direction. So I like to think about that as I have like two different buckets. One bucket has shape or amplitude, and I need to take out at least one of those for it to be valid. The other bucket has work plane or direction, and I need to be able to take out at least one from that bucket for it to be valid. We'll watch some examples here. All right, so we can see that there is a big difference in the amplitude of the two clubs in this example. I'll play it again. We see one club is doing those small circles and the other one does a large circle. The small circles are initiated by the wrist. That large circle is initiated by the whole arm from the shoulder. So this is clearly different amplitude. And we also see that the two clubs are going different directions. The club that's doing the small circles, that one's rotating forward, and the one that's doing a large circle, that one's rotating backward. So this is what it means to have or to be unique in the shape or amplitude and in the work plane or direction. This is a similar example, except we see that club that's doing the small circles, it's held out to the side. Another similar example in this one. And so now we see in these, there's just little differences, but we can see that there can be a difference of the work plane and the direction in all these movements. All those varieties of, I want to go back if it'll let me. All these varieties of small circles, it doesn't want to go back, but the varieties of small circles that we just talked about, those can also be all these different varieties in the asymmetric movements. Here we go. And here, this one, it's not executed perfectly, but I wanted to show it that it's possible. She's actually rotating one club on her hand. So it doesn't have to be just these small circles. It is not possible to do with a small throw of the clubs. She does kind of accidentally do a tiny small throw. So it's not executed the best, but I wanted to show it as an example that it would be possible to, for example, rotate the club on the open palm and then do a different movement with the other one, just to give more variety. But most often we do see these first examples that are quite similar. We're going to talk now about asymmetric movements that are not actually asymmetric movements and thus are not valid. So small rotations with time delay or performed in different directions are not considered asymmetric movements because they have the same shape and the same amplitude. So then you would really just have small circles, a different variety of small circles. One large circle in the same direction as small circles of the same plane is not considered asymmetric movement because it does not meet the criteria of having a different work plane and direction. So what that means is if you're doing small circles forward with one club, and then you do in the same direction, a large circle forward, those would not be considered an asymmetric movement because they're in the same work plane and they're in the same direction. Okay, and then tapping does not have a clear working plane or direction and cannot be part of asymmetric movements. So we're going to take a look here at some things that would not be considered asymmetric movements. I don't know if the coaches choreographed this thinking it was asymmetric or not. So it's nothing against the coaches. It could have just been choreography, but I know that there is confusion at times of things like this, whether or not they can count as asymmetric movement. We see she's turning in a circle. Both clubs are going the same direction and they're just alternating as she turns. Here, this was clearly actually just a throw preparation, but sometimes gymnasts do something like this, seemingly wanting it to be asymmetric movement. We see that both clubs are going in the same direction and they're in the same work plane. Oops, let's play this one again. There we go. And here we see the gymnast doing a small circle and then a large circle. We have both clubs are in that same work plane. And they're just alternating, they're doing the same thing. So they do small and then big, but both clubs are doing the small and then both clubs are doing the big. So this would not be asymmetric movement. They do the small circle together and the big circle together. And here we see an example. This would be small circles. We do have the different work plane / direction, but they're doing the same shape and they're doing the same amplitude. So for that reason, this would not be valid asymmetric movement. I see a question, should it be, I think it means 3 small circles. If you're going for the series of small circles, yes. For the asymmetric movement, my understanding is no. It just needs to fulfill the definition of the asymmetric movement, but that definition does not say it has to be a series of small circles. All right, now we'll move on to small throws and catches with rotation. Peeking at how we're doing on time. I better hurry up a little bit. Okay. So small throws and catches may be performed with the clubs simultaneously or alternating. Pay attention to ensure that the clubs complete the full 360-degree rotation in the air before the catch to fulfill the definition. Here's an example. And I wanted to talk specifically about small throws and catches with rotation when the clubs are alternating. I think there may be some confusion about this. I want to make sure everybody is on the same page. So when it says alternating, it does not mean we throw one, we catch it, we throw the other one, and we catch it. There must be a moment when both clubs are in the air at the same time, kind of similar to the cascade technique, the larger throws, but there has to be that moment in time when both clubs are in the air. Here's an example of what would be valid. So we see she throws that second club before she catches the first. This next example that I'm going to show you is what we often, pretty much always see in the level 5 routines if they appear to be trying to do a throw alternating. Right, we see she definitely has more than 360-degree rotation on the clubs. That's great, but she catches the first one before she releases that second club. So this would be invalid. And we'll see from a different angle one more example of a valid small throw of 2 clubs with the alternating, technique. Okay. So coaches, if you're going to put this in the routine, make sure that you and your gymnast understand that alternating means this. They must both be in the air at some moment in time together and not this. It's a little bit confusing because if we look at the definition in the English language, alternating is like one after the other, but there must be that moment in time, kind of like the cascade technique, where they're both in the air. Okay, I was just checking the Q&A. Now we're gonna watch some examples. I pulled all of the small throws from a routine, and we are gonna watch and decide which of these videos would count toward the requirement of small throws and catches with rotation, minimum 360 of 2 clubs together, unlocked, simultaneously, or alternating. So that's our definition. Which of these would be valid toward it? I'll play that one again. What do we think? Why don't you guys throw in the chat, be a little bit interactive. Is this valid toward the requirement or not? Oops. Sorry, the wrong one played. Here's that first one again. Valid or invalid? See, one answer, not. Anybody else want to chime in, or do we all agree? No, not valid. Correct. So here, she actually is invalid for two reasons. One is that she throws one, catches it, throws the other, and catches it. But watch, and they actually are also not doing the full 360-degree rotation. Do we see that? How she catches it, and the club is still facing back toward her. It hasn't done that full rotation. So there's two reasons why this one would be not valid. Correct. Now let's watch this one. All right, go ahead and put in the chat, yes or no. No, not valid. Correct. We can see there, yes, Ashley, it's very clearly just the half rotation with the club. So we need to make sure that they have that 360-degree full rotation. All right, let's watch this last one. Valid or not valid? Correct. This one is also not valid for the reason that we just talked about. If the clubs are alternating, you need to have a moment where they're both in the air at the same time. And here we see she throws and catches, throws and catches. All right, so unfortunately, if a gymnast had a routine, and this is obviously a real life routine, all the same gymnast, you would not have anything that fulfills that requirement in this routine. Now we're going to look at some examples of different throw techniques with the clubs. All right, and coaches usually do a pretty good job of putting different throw techniques in with clubs. Judges do a pretty good job of seeing it, so I'm going to keep going for the sake of time. Now we're going to look at the table of criteria for catches in level 5 for ball and clubs. So our possibilities for a catch with criteria would be outside visual control, without the help of the hands. Note that this is not valid for catching the apparatus on the back of the hands. During a rotation, in a position on the floor, a direct catch with rolling of the apparatus on the body, a mixed catch, a catch of the ball with one hand from a high or medium throw. That should sound familiar. So we have a note here. This is a separate catch from another identical or different type of throw than what was used to fulfill the apparatus technical group requirement. I think they're called something different now, but I think we all understand, and we talked about this in detail. A catch under the leg or legs, or a catch of the two clubs unlocked. This can be simultaneous, or it can be cascade, double or triple. And we have this note, two clubs must both be visible in the air during the part of the cascade throw. So that is the same as we just discussed with that alternating throw of the two clubs with the small throw. Okay, now we're going to look at examples of catching outside the visual field. This would be valid. And this would be valid. Now, next here is an example that's not valid. We'll see that she catches the ball behind her neck with two hands. This is not valid. Here is some more detail, and you can find all of these notes in your development program handbook. We have all of these diagrams that clearly show where the ball would need to be considered outside visual field. And we also have notes explaining it. I'm going to go ahead and move forward for the sake of time. If people have questions about outside visual field, feel free to put them in and we can cover it. Next, we'll go over catch without hands. Reminder that a catch without hands is not valid for the mixed catch. Catching the apparatus on the back of the hands, or a catch of the club on the inner side of the hand and forearm with the other club, Those are all not valid for catch without the hands. Now we're going to look at some valid examples. This is very common in level 5. As something like that would be also. Now we're going to see an example of catch during rotation. It's a little bit questionable, but it's actually the best I could find looking through a lot of routines of this level. And if we watch, she does start going for the rotation before she catches the club. So this will be valid, but we need to be careful that we don't catch and then go for the rotation. I think I have an example of that here. Yes. So note here how the gymnast catches and then begins the rotation. This one would not be valid as a catch during the rotation. The rotation, like we just talked about, must be initiated. They must be starting it before the catch. You see that she catches. Very obviously, this is not during. We'll look now at catch on the floor. And the definition of a position on the floor, it changed somewhat recently. This is how it was last season, but prior to that, it was different. So make sure we're all on the same page here. Apparatus elements performed while lying down in a position on the floor from the beginning to the end of the element. The full trunk must be lying flat on the floor, regardless of if it's facing up or down or on the side. It is allowed to let the shoulders pull up just a little bit for the sake of the position or the choreography, but the trunk, the torso must be on the floor. Here are some examples of valid catches on the floor. All right, we can see here at the moment of the catch, she has her trunk on the floor. All right, similarly in this one, at the moment of the catch, we can see she's laying down. Her trunk is on the floor. All right, and in this one, we can see her shoulders are a tiny bit lifted, but that's fine. Her trunk, her torso is on the floor. These are all valid positions for a catch on the floor. Now, something like this on the knee would not be valid. We'll see more examples of catches which would not be considered a catch on the floor. Just on her knee, this has no criteria. This one's a little trickier. We might think, no, she's on the floor. But if we look, her hip bones are on the floor. That's the only part of her torso that's on the floor. So of course, this would still be a catch with criteria. We still have without the hands, we still have outside visual field, but it's not going to be considered for the on the floor criteria. Next criteria is a direct catch with a roll. Here's a valid example. And here's an example of what would not be valid for a catch in the roll. The gymnast catches, and then after a pause, she initiates the roll. We can see she catches, pauses, and then rolls. Something that I find helpful when evaluating this is also to look at the angle of the gymnast's shoulders. If the shoulders are piked, if there's like a right angle here, then there's not going to be really any way for that to be continuously directly into the roll. That's what we see in this gymnast catch. She catches, the arms are here. So of course she's going to have to pause and adjust and bring them over her head to roll. But watch this gymnast, how there's that straight line there. Her arms are already extended, the shoulders are open when she catches, and that allows her to go directly into the roll. So this would be valid. We have a mixed catch. Same example that we've seen recently. Everyone uses this example. It's not common. It's very difficult. It's unique, and it looks really, really cool, but we don't see it really ever in level 5. The definition of the mixed catch is a catch with one club caught in the hand and the other without the hands. All right, then we have the catch of the ball in one hand from the medium or high throw as the catch with criteria. And here's our note. If this is used as the catch with criteria in a ball routine, a separate catch from another identical or different type of throw must be used to fulfill the fundamental technical group requirement. Here's a valid example. This will be valid for catch in one hand. Now, let's make sure we all understand this is not valid for outside visual field. We see a lot of gymnasts more in the higher levels, not really level 5. We see a lot of gymnasts though catching like this and seemingly wanting outside visual field for it. That is not outside visual field, but it is a catch in one hand. And here's an example that would not be valid. We'll see that the gymnast supports the catch with her forearm and her body. Okay, so this would not be valid toward that requirement. Here we see an example of a catch under the leg. Of course, it doesn't need to be in this position. You could just have one knee up and sitting on the other knee and reach under that leg, but this is also a valid example. And we see more valid examples here. An example of a catch of 2 clubs unlocked. Of course, an execution penalty there, but this is the definition. And I will go as quick as I can with ribbon. So for ribbon, we have a requirement for 3 different spirals. And a reminder that spirals must have 4 to 5 loops that are tight and the same height in the air or on the floor. We have the same requirement for 3 different snakes. Then there must be 1 set of spirals executed with the non-dominant hand, 1 set of snakes executed with the non-dominant hand. And those 2 requirements are in addition to the above requirement. So that means that it's going to be a minimum of 4 spirals and 4 snakes in each routine. It's required to have a large circle executed with the non-dominant hand. Also required to have a small throw, échappé type throw that includes the full rotation of the stick in flight and 2 dance steps combinations. Here we'll have some examples of various different spiral techniques. Spirals are consecutive loops of the ribbon created by circular movements of the wrist. The stick is held lightly in the palm of the hand, and that will be between the thumb, the index, and the middle fingers. The index finger should be extended down the length of the stick. The spirals may be performed in many planes, directions, or levels. And that same reminder again, because we often see spirals and snakes with only 3 loops and waves in level 5, but the loops must be a continuous 4 to 5 loops. They must be tight and should have the same amplitude, the height and the length. So here I'm just going to play these various examples of spirals. Execution, not great, especially on this last one, but using it just for an example of that different technique. Now for snakes, they are consecutive waves of the ribbon created with a vigorous side to side or flexion and extension movement of the wrist. The waves must be continuous with 4 to 5 waves. They should be tight and have the same amplitude, meaning the height and the length. The snakes also can be performed in many planes, directions, and levels. Let's see some examples here. This one that I displayed, we often see that with only 2 or 3 waves. So make sure if you're going to choreograph this type of snakes that it has the 4 to 5 waves in it. She did do more than we usually see when that technique is used. All right. Another reminder that The apparatus elements must be performed by the definition to be valid. And the 4 to 5 loops and waves is part of the definition. So if a level 5 is performing snakes or spirals and there are only 2 or 3 loops or waves, then that is not valid toward the requirement. They're going to end up getting an execution penalty and it won't be valid toward their difficulty requirement. So coaches, please work hard with your gymnasts on their patterns, and judges, please pay attention so that we make that difference in the score. Here's an example where we can see, and I'll play it again, I'll drag it slow, but she never has more than 3 loops in the ribbon at any time. We need to have 4 to 5. And here. Similar with snakes, I'll drag it slow so you can see there's definitely never 4 waves in that ribbon during the performance of that pattern. We'll talk now about large circles. The gymnast circles the ribbon with a large movement of the arm that comes from the shoulder. The hand with the stick should be an extension of the arm and forearm. It should be a straight line. The gymnast should perform large circles with a strong and active movement of the arm. And this should be done stressing the upward movement of the ribbon. She should maintain the circular pattern of the ribbon during the entire element. Large circles may be performed in various planes and directions. Here are some examples. And we're going to talk quickly about medium versus large circles. So the level 5 apparatus requirement calls for a large circle of the ribbon. A medium circle would not fulfill this requirement. So we're going to look at the difference between the two. Medium circles are generally performed with the movement coming from the wrist or the elbow, whereas large circles are performed with the movement from the full arm, generally. So here's an example. These are from the same routine. We're going to see a large circle and a medium circle. This is a large circle, and this is a medium circle. So of course, it's totally fine to put this in a level 5 ribbon routine for choreography, but just know that it needs to be a large circle to be valid. Now we'll go over échappé. It's a type of a small throw that includes a rotation of the stick in flight. It may be performed in a variety of planes and directions. And for this requirement, it should be thrown less than 1 height of the gymnast. It is possible to do a medium or large throw with the échappé technique, but that's not what is being requested for this requirement. Now these, we can't really see how high they go because it's cut off. So these are just different techniques of the échappé, and we're going to assume that they are not more than 1 height of the gymnast. We can see here different techniques of the échappé. All right. Thank you for bearing with me as I went through the end there quickly and went a little bit over. Do we have any questions?
Jamie, there was one question back regarding the body wave, where a
Okay.
coach had written, if a gymnast slightly moves her feet due to a very small loss of balance, does the wave get credit or not?
It would, as long as she still shows the proper sequential movement. So if that loss of balance causes her to not show the sequential movement of all the parts of the body, then for that reason, it would be invalidated, not due to the loss of balance, but due to not fulfilling the definition of the wave. But if she ends up moving her feet and she still is fulfilling the definition of the wave, it would be valid.
And I think, I mean, you can check too, obviously you can see them. I think you touched on the rest. There was a question about, oh, do you want to get that last one about the dance steps?
Can a gymnast perform big circles during dance steps? Yes. Hopefully that doesn't need elaboration. They can perform the apparatus elements during the dance steps, that's fine. And it can be part of the choreography of the dance steps, even if it's not needed for the apparatus requirement.
Okay, and then there was a question here. Can the body circumduction be considered a body wave? You presented the video earlier. If you can, which are we looking for contraction? I mean, we did it, the video wasn't just the arms doing this. It was the going from the plie of the knees up like this and finishing like this. So it just, I think, if I may, I believe that Jamie showed that to show the variation of the position of the arms, but she had started with a plie, she'd contracted up, and then she'd finished like this, or that was the intent, correct? Jamie?
Exactly. So if there is not sufficient movement with the hips and the knees and that plie, then it would be a partial body wave and would not be valid. But like Caroline said, if performed correctly, it can be valid toward the requirement.
Yeah. So this basically the circumduction was a variety of the arms, which I believe was encapsulated in the slide, that particular slide you were showing.
Yes.
And I think the rest that you got. Oh,
Can the wave requirement be during dance step? We don't have anywhere that says it cannot be. I would probably caution coaches that most likely it's going to interrupt the dance steps. But if somehow you can perform it and it really looks like part of the dance steps, I have not seen anywhere written that we can't have that in the development program.
that's a good question. I was excited listening to all this earlier in the discussion because I think there was some good remarks that of things people would like to see that Jamie's going to kind of integrate in tomorrow too. And that's what we've been saying, like that kind of back and forth is really helpful so that each of one of these webinars really serves what you need. So I think Jamie will address those tomorrow. She'll bring a few more examples in of invalid waves. And since we've gone a little bit over today, tomorrow when we start, we can show you where on the resources page you can find the waves and the waves course, which shows valid and invalid waves, and where you can find all of these on the website. Essentially, you're going to the rhythmic page, you're going to education, and you're going to rhythmic resources. You'll see them all posted under the 2023 fall learning series, and you have to be current with your membership. Jamie, thank you. This was so extensive with the amount of examples that you chose and the variety, where you showing people variety. It's really great. Any last questions for Jamie on today? Yeah. We go.
Yeah, thank you all, like Caroline said, just for your participation. I'm so glad we can do this and ask questions and bring up things that other people might not have even thought about in our questions. So it's great just to be able to brainstorm and work together.
Yeah, and Jamie, thank you, because not just now, but of course, all the years prior, Jamie has looked at so many little tiny rhythmic gymnast examples, and they're so cute. Really, I've so much
adorable
watching all this, but Jamie has really dug her hands into level 4 and level 5 and examples, and it takes a lot of time and a crazy amount of patience, and I'm grateful that you're willing to keep plugging away at it.
Yes, and I look forward to seeing the littles soon in competition again.
Oh, they're so cute. I love seeing it. This is an opportunity for me. I've just been looking at 18-year-olds for too long, and this has been really fun and special for me too. So all of the coaches that are still on, I literally love watching this too, and thank you. See you tomorrow, everybody.
See you tomorrow, same time.
Bye.